So let's say that your 14-year-old daughter disappears. And so you have a photograph of this person. What the AI will do is 2 years later is project what this person might look like. And then what AI will be used to look at websites that promote sexual sales, like it used to be Backpage or Craigslist or various websites that have actual photographs and information about this. And then they'll in a millisecond be looking at millions of these websites. And as a result of that, they often get a hit. And as a result of that hit, this information is given over to law enforcement people.
Hi, Matthew. A very good afternoon to you. Thank you so
Hello.
much for joining us today.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, it is with great pleasure for me to introduce our speaker today, Matthew Friedman, the founder and CEO of Mekong Club. He has been working extensively to fight modern slavery and human trafficking. And in today's session of the Security Bill, Matthew and I will be discussing how AI tools can be implemented to fight human trafficking. So without much ado, I would ask you to quickly introduce yourself so we can go forward with the interview.
So as you indicated, my name is Matt Friedman. I'm the CEO of an organization called the Mekong Club. The Mekong Club works with the private sector in a positive, supportive, non-naming and shaming way to help them to understand the issue of human trafficking, modern slavery, forced labor, and how it relates to their business. So the banks, for example, are concerned about this issue because the profits generated from modern slavery, 150 billion US dollars. If any of that money gets into a bank, it's money laundering, they get fined. There was a bank in Australia that was fined 1.3 billion Australian dollars. The retailers and the manufacturers are interested in this topic because of supply chains. Somewhere in their supply chain, they may have a sweatshop that could be exposed by investigative journalists, and that could create a reputational risk. And so we help them to identify this risk and address it. We work with the hospitality sector because they have forced prostitution that they have to be concerned with. And we look at tech as well because, social networking and various other tech tools and apps and various other things could be used by the criminals in order to exploit people. And so what we do is we help companies to understand where their vulnerability is and what they need to do in order to address it.
Right. So as you work extensively in this field, and studies have shown that over the years, despite all the effort people are putting in, the industry has continued to grow. So understanding the present day scenario, what are some of the major challenges you have faced by tackling major situations in this aspect?
Well, let me put into perspective the number of people who are estimated to be in this situation. It's estimated there's 50 million people in what's called modern slavery. About a third of them would be forced marriages, where you'd have a person forced into a marriage, not to be a traditional, bride in a household, but to be a worker within a household. The rest of them are divided between forced labor and sex trafficking. So we're talking about literally millions of people. In this part of the world, in South and Southeast Asia, about 62% of the people who are in modern slavery are here because you have large population size. India and China, 1.4 billion, and then you have Indonesia, Pakistan, all these other countries have big populations, and you have, a large number of people who are in desperate circumstances. That leads to the opportunity for people to be exploited. So one of the biggest issues that we face is a lack of general awareness about this particular topic. I do a lot of presentations all over the world. I do about 300 a year. I just came back from North America. I do it in Africa and here in Asia and Middle East and so forth. I'm always surprised that when I'm getting in front of professionals, how few people actually have a generalized understanding of what we're talking about. If you don't know about a topic, you're not going to care. If you don't care, you're not going to do anything. And so probably the biggest challenge that I face is just getting people to understand that what we're dealing with here is big, it's pervasive, and it needs to be addressed by a private sector response. And helping them to understand that has been a constraint because we just haven't been able to get in front of enough people to talk about this.
Right. So to a great extent, I also feel that people are not aware because in terms of the term modern slavery, a lot of people don't understand the fact that slavery still exists, but in a different form.
Let me respond to that because that's an important point.
Yeah.
So human trafficking as a phrase has switched over to modern slavery.
Yes.
And basically human trafficking is forced labor. So human trafficking was selected because many of the cases initially had a person go from one country to another. And so trafficking is about, the movement of something in order to exploit it. Over time, people said, well, wait a minute. We see cases where somebody goes from Nepal to India. We see cases from within India. They go from, Delhi to Kolkata, and we see somebody from one side of Mumbai to another side of Mumbai. So why are we focusing on the movement? Shouldn't we focus on the exploitation? So when you look at a person who doesn't get paid, can't leave a situation, they're indebted, all kinds of other things. The closest word was slavery, but because people think of slavery that happened a long time ago, they put the word modern. So modern slavery is the outcome of human trafficking. It's just been redefined for this day and age. But as I say, 50 million people estimated to be in this situation.
So moving on to my next question. It's evident that we've seen that technology has played a major role in almost all industries. So, but there are always pros and cons to it. So have you seen any sort of negative impact or hindrance that technological advancement has made to the progress in this particular field? And if you have, can you share some examples of that?
Yeah, I'll give you a couple of examples. That, for example, if you use social networking as a designated technology, a large percentage of people who are recruited into forced labor or sex trafficking are introduced through chat rooms or social networking, advertisement, and so forth. So, as an example, in China, you have a person who is 15 years old and she basically feels misunderstood, and she gets on a chat line, and somebody who presents himself as a 17-year-old boy from China uh, starts having a conversation with her. He's actually a 55-year-old guy with 5 computers opened. He's pretending to be somebody he's not. And then they develop a relationship, and he seems very respectful and trustworthy. And as a result of this situation, eventually says, let's meet. And so he has the person who was the photograph of who he's presenting himself meet her. He's part of the trafficking approach. He'll meet with the girl, take her to lunch, and then she wakes up in a motel room with compromising pictures. And he basically says, well, if you don't do what we say, then as a result of this, we're going to show this to your family and to your network and everything else. And so you can extort people into prostitution. This happens quite often. They get drugged, they drug the girl, and then they extort something out of her. Another thing is we're seeing this here in Southeast Asia, where there are advertisements on social networking saying, if you want to make 5,000 US dollars a month working in a casino in Cambodia, contact us and you can have this great job. So they even go through something that seems like a regular interview. They go to Cambodia, and then this person is forced into a scam center. You probably heard about these centers. They're all over Asia now, where a person is forced for 14 hours a day to scam people out of their money. That itself has technology associated with it, because you have new phony websites that are being developed, phony apps, phony data collection mechanisms, and so forth that are developed. And so there are manuals and there's training. And so the organized crime people are very organized in this case, and they're using technology as a means to both traffic people into this and then to use the technology to go after these people at the same time.
So like you said, it's evident that technology has made it even more difficult because it's easier to trap people now, especially
Yes.
almost with internet being everywhere. So it is
Yes.
quite probably difficult for the people who are working towards the cause to track it, which is
That's
where
right.
I think my next question, which comes into AI, comes into play. So there have been several studies and several researchers that have suggested that AI can play a great role in helping the fight against human trafficking and, as you said, modern slavery. So, are you at present aware of any such technologies that are working towards, or any such platform and software that is working towards combating this?
Yeah, actually, in the United States, you have organizations that will use AI to do facial recognition. Analytics, Maritime Analytics, I forget how that's pronounced, has been doing this for quite some time. So let's say that your 14-year-old daughter disappears. And so you have a photograph of this person. What the AI will do is, 2 years later, is project what this person might look like. And then what AI will be used to look at websites that promote sexual sales, like it used to be Backpage or Craigslist or various websites that have actual photographs and information about this. And then they'll in a millisecond be looking at millions of these websites. And as a result of that, they often get a hit. And as a result of that hit, this information is given over to law enforcement people. AI can troll through all types of information related to the promotion of sex. Sales, because, like, for instance, in Hong Kong, if you put call girl in Hong Kong, you're going to get these websites that will advertise women and girls. And, this isn't a legal type of activity to have this, but you find it in every country in the world, this access. If law enforcement people want to find people or address things, they can use these sites. But the idea of using AI to perhaps look at all of these sites and to look at phone numbers, for example, or WhatsApp numbers, or various other things, and then to use something like Palantir that would visually show you exactly the relationships. Then you see these spider graphs that has a particular phone number that everybody is drawing to. So AI can be used as a means of identifying links within criminal behavior that can then be addressed. So because as human beings, for us to do that manually would just take hours and weeks and months to do, the advantage of AI, if you apply it to a particular scenario or set of data, you can do things so much quicker. We are in the process of looking at how we can move into this. But where AI is now is that the people who do it and the people who need it haven't really gotten together yet. That transition is actually happening. But if we had access to the ability to have AI troll through, even the dark web and to collect type of information, just imagine where we would be in terms of responding to this criminal activity.
Right. So clearly there is a gap right now that needs to be bridged. And obviously, people who are working towards it, it probably hasn't developed to that extent where it can be implemented. It may be available on paper, probably on reports, but where are we in terms of implementation? I'm not very clear, right?
Well, okay, so there are people who are already applying this and experimenting and testing, and that's where we are now. And we're beginning to see these articles coming out about how AI can write marketing text, and they can write a love letter better than somebody else, or poetry, or develop music. Obviously, that's the exciting side of it. But there are technical people who are out there that work for companies that have good jobs and they like their jobs, but maybe there's something missing. Maybe they're thinking like, I want to contribute, I want to help. Maybe I can do some pro bono work to work with an organization like the Mekong Club to help them with some searches to see how AI can be applied. That's kind of what we're waiting to have happen. We had the same thing happen with blockchain, where as a person who heard about blockchain, I watched about 10 of those blockchain for dummy videos. It took the 11th one, I finally got it. It took me a while. I'm not a tech person, but I then went to my one of my employees and I said, help me to see the interface of how blockchain works. I don't I need to see it. I'm a visual person. So she wrote a report. Then an organization, Diginex, came to us and said, okay, well, let's do a project where we are for-profit company working on this, but we want to give something back. And as a result of that, we were able to develop some software and various other things. This is how the tech world can engage with the NGO world, because you guys in the tech world already have the skills and the abilities, and you're using them for-profit purposes, and that's great. We love that. but at the same time, it can be applied for not-for-profit. And that's a good thing for that organization to say, yeah, we're doing all this great AI work, but we're also helping to make the world a better place because we're working with this organization. The NGOs don't have the resources to buy into this at this particular point. Maybe someday we will, but we don't now. So it would have to be that type of a collaborative relationship.
Absolutely, I agree with you because obviously we are progressing in terms of technology, but if it can be integrated for a good cause, especially to combat something like human trafficking, then I think it would overall be great for people around the world, especially those who are experiencing forced labor or are forced into it, on a day-to-day basis. I think it would impact them.
Yeah, or forced prostitution. There's 4.8 million women and girls in forced prostitution. A 13-year-old girl forced to have sex with 20 guys a day for years until she gets a disease and eventually dies. Times 4.8 million. It's a terrible thing. It happens all over the world. If a person felt like they wanted to be part of helping to address that solution, wow. It feels good when you are able to apply your skills and abilities to something that really does help to address the needs of these people who are in terrible, terrible circumstances.
Absolutely. I would want to ask you that in the years that you worked, and obviously since you've been associated in this field for a very long time, have you come across instances where specific technologies are put to use to probably, fight or, inspect a case, or where you were able to reach faster to a victim because of a certain technology or a software or a process you used, which probably able to use like 10 years or 15 years back?
Yeah, I don't have an example. Let's pretend this is a cell phone. It's not, obviously. But so auditors basically came to us and said, we go to a factory and we audit them. But in the factory area where the workers are, you have a lot of migrants. Now, the migrants are the ones that are most vulnerable to being exploited. So as an auditor, you want to talk to them, but you don't know where they come from. You don't have an interpreter. So we developed a tool called a prize app. And let's assume this was a phone. On the interface of the smartphone would be flags. So the auditor goes up to one of the workers and gets them to press the flag from where they come from. And then with headphones on, attached to the phone, in that person's language, it would say, we're going to ask you some questions. If the answer to the question is yes, press green, no, press red. And then you give about 20 questions. Some of them are health and safety, but some of them are, do you have any indebtedness? Do you work overtime and not get paid? Do you have your passport being withheld by somebody? And then they answer these questions, and they answer honestly. And so through this simple technology, you're able to identify the extent to which there's exploitation in a factory that in the past they've audited it 20 times and they never found anything because they could never communicate with somebody. So this is just a simple tool using blockchain to basically, when a migrant in Nepal is going to go from Nepal to Malaysia, the employer and the employee blockchain all of the information. And so when the person gets to Malaysia, they have immutable information related to the fact that, they went through steps, all of their training is blockchain, everything that happens to them is available so that the factory can show to the brand that is using them that we're not exploiting these people because we have all this documented. So the number of potential things that could be used in the future, even NFTs, are beginning to be used by organizations to fundraise. We developed a NFT program where we got some artists and they developed some NFTs and linked it to cryptocurrency and so forth. And as a result of this, when people want to give a donation, they get something back at the same time. And then we translate that into regular currency to support our activities. So as an organization, the Mekong Club recognized that there's a cutting edge that is outside of our realm, but perhaps worthwhile and useful that we would always be interested in experimenting with. We don't know if it's going to work or not work, but it's worth trying because there's so many people in this terrible circumstance that need our help, and we'll use whatever means we can to address that.
That's commendable, and honestly, it's great the kind of work you're doing, the initiative you've taken. It's absolutely wonderful that you're out there helping people, and to have that mindset where you're flexible to adapting to new things, especially technology in this field. I think that's a very, it's a great approach. So I know you've talked about this, but I want to know in terms of your opinion and the way you have dealt with situations, is there at present a considerable lapse when dealing with human trafficking and modern slavery? And can technology in any way bridge that gap?
Okay, so let's talk about the numbers. There's 50 million people in modern slavery. That calculates to about 9.2 million people entering per year, or in a single day, 25,200 people somewhere in the world are entering into modern slavery. With all of the United Nations and the governments and the NGOs combined, out of 50 million people, we helped 108,000. That's 0.2%. When it comes to 500,000 criminals, the world put about 8,000 of them in jail last year. That's 0.8%. So we are not having any impact at all. And the reason for that is the number of people that are like us that do this is about 30,000 against 500,000 greed incentivized criminals. And awareness is low. So yeah, we need whatever help we can come up with in order to address this. And so, for example, the banks, we work with the banks, and the banks are interested in this topic because if any of the $150 billion generated from modern slavery gets into a legitimate bank, then it's money laundering and they get fined. There was a bank in Australia that was fined 1.3 billion Australian dollars. So what the banks do is develop what are called typologies. A typology basically looks at the perpetrator and the victim at different steps. Then it looks at the transactions that are in place and then uses those transactions to determine if there are patterns that could be to show human trafficking. For example, in the United States, there was a nail salon chain run by Vietnamese people. They had hours from 9 in the morning till 9 o'clock at night, but an auditor found that there were transactions taking place at 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, around $200 US. And when they looked into it, they came to realize there was a sex trafficking ring in that same business. So the indicators, the red flags would be transactions after hours around $200 with a particular type of business. If you then used your AI to apply it to big data to see if you find similar patterns, then you're able to identify whether or not you might have other issues within that. So having tools that are able to really be a brain to analyze and to visualize, because it's not just about analyzing a bunch of data. You have to be able to take the data, and with tools like Palantir and A2 and various other things, you have many visualization tools that allow us to then say, this is where we need to intervene. So we don't waste our time with little fish and little criminals. Let's go right after the ones that are right in there. And I definitely feel like AI has a place for that now. And as a result of that, I think once we get to a point where that type of technology is applied to our world, then you're going to see the breakthroughs, much more than the NGOs doing community-based activities. It's certainly within the realm of possibility.
Yeah, then I'm hoping that even the percentage goes up in that aspect and the number of people involved in it come down. Like that's the target, that's the hope. Matthew, I have asked all my questions and you've answered them like absolutely. I couldn't have asked for more. So if there's anything you would want to add from your side, which probably I missed out.
No, I'll tell one story that puts this into perspective, though, and that is, so years ago when I was living and working in Nepal, I was a public health officer. I was coming in contact with a lot of sex trafficking victims. Many of them ended up in India, in the brothels there and so forth. So I wanted to write a book. So as part of this book, I went from shelter to shelter to interview the women and the girls. And I went to one shelter, and there was a girl named Geeta who had been trafficked from India to Mumbai. And, every time I approach her, she said, no, 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 I don't want to give my story. But when I was about to leave that shelter, she comes running up and says, I changed my mind. You can have it. So Geeta sat on one side of the table, the rest of us on the other side of the table. In over a 3-hour period, she told the worst story of rape and torture and disease and betrayal. And honestly, it was such a horrible story. I didn't know what to say. I was speechless. I finally turned to Geeta and I said, wow, Geeta, you must be so angry at the traffickers for the horrific things they did to you. She paused and then said, no, I'm angry at you and you and you. She pointed at us. She said, where were you? Said that every single day she woke up praying for somebody to come and help. Nobody came. Said she went to school till she was 12. She knew that all this illegal activity was right out in the open. Nobody was doing anything. She said she wasn't angry at the traffickers. She said they're just bad people being bad people. Said she was angry at the good people, at society for allowing a 15-year-old girl to be commercially raped 7,000 times only to eventually get AIDS. Now, I tell this story because, my world are only helping less than 0.5% of the victims. The world needs to care about this. We have 4.8 million women, who are being used anywhere from 2 to 20 times a day, every day. That is just an unacceptable situation. I remember that rape case in India where that medical student was on the bus and all of a sudden everybody got up in arms. Why don't we have that type of movement? We need the world to care about this. We need the world to step up. We need all of us to say enough is enough. This can't happen in this day and age in 2023. And so finding people who have the skills and the abilities related to technology, AI, blockchain, all those things, and finding ways of applying it to our world would really help us to make a difference. And that's just kind of a plea for some help. Let's help these people. Let's address their needs. It's really, really important.
Yes, I absolutely agree with you. Even hearing that story, I can't imagine, the situation people are put in. And it's
Yes.
evident that you're very passionate about this. I can see it through the screen. And I do hope, we break through in that aspect and come across some sort of ways, especially in technology, where we're able to, catch the perpetrators and then, probably put them behind bars. That's the kind of, and you are absolutely right. It shouldn't take one major incident or case for us to suddenly, wake up and say, no, this is not something that's acceptable. Every single case should make us feel that way.
Exactly.
Which I think is not the situation right now. It's very unfortunate, but that's unfortunately the reality right now. People are not passionate enough, or probably they don't care enough to, make that move, to create that awareness. And it's great that people like you are working towards it so selflessly, involved in it to help people. And I think I honestly am thankful for you that you're working towards this cause. It's great.
You probably saw that I committed to 365 posts on LinkedIn. I think that's how we connected. And as a result of that, I've had lots of people reach out to me, and when they have something to offer, we tie them into either our organization or some other organization. And that's really where the breakthroughs are going to happen. You can live your life, have a good salary, have your family and everything else, but also give something of yourself. Join in a pro bono way an organization, add value. It doesn't have to be super time consuming, but if we moved in the direction of people accepting that kind of responsibility, the world would be a much better place for sure.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Matthew, for joining me today. It's been
Thank you for the opportunity. It was great to have this chat with you.
I personally feel that this would not only help people understand that, yes, technology exists and there are ways to help people, but also spread awareness about this cause, which is, I think, a lot more important, needs a lot more voice. So thank you so much again for joining me today.
Thank you for the opportunity.